Hi students, it's Mrs. Girot, and I just wanted to give you some video directions for FinArtB Project 3. There are two parts to this project. Part 1 is to paint a modernist painting, and here are some examples of student work. We've got a couple of paintings that are not representational, that are more abstract, and then we have a couple of modernist paintings that are representational. And then we have some mixed media for our part 2 together, like this student has a background layer that is painted and then has all of these little strips that were painted separately and then glued on the page, so you can kind of see this three-dimensional effect where the buildings are kind of coming off of the paper and creating shadows. So that's an example of mixed media. And then a collage is an example of a mixed media. This is a fantastic example. It's got a background that's been painted in a nice earthy color. You can see the texture of the strokes, and then everything that is applied, it all unites as a theme of spring, and it's just done beautifully. And this is mixed media. It's harder to see, but there's actually like this incredible texture. I don't know what kind of paper this student used for the background, but they painted the background, and then they have these little strips that they've painted, like, I don't know what they are. I don't know if it's paper or tissue paper or more cardboard, and you can actually see the texture. You can see the 3D effect of it coming off of the page. So mixed media artwork has a tendency to give a little bit of 3D lift. It can be completely 3D as well. But let's take a look at the textbook for examples. So I'm just looking at Unit 5 and kind of skipping around. This is a Fauvist work of art. Now, the word fauve, if you've been doing Unit 5 this week, you know that it means wild beasts. So the Fauves embrace their name, wild beasts. They're eager to escape the conventions of traditional art, and they turned away from established rules of using proper perspective, color, details, and modeling to express themselves in bold new ways. Now, even with your Impressionism paintings, most of your Impressionism paintings were proper proportion. They were in perspective. And now you can see that it's getting a little wacky and wild. So Fauvism is an example of something that could inspire your painting. Henri Matisse was a Fauvist, and this is a painting of his wife, Amélie. Yes, the composition is conventional, but everything else is new. Matisse applied a thick apple green stripe from the forehead to the upper lip to separate Amélie's face into two distinct halves. Her unflinching gaze is set off by strong, arched brows. Energetic brushstrokes add drama to the portrait. And color. Look at the use of color. It's just imaginary. It's creative. Here's another Fauvist artwork by Matisse, The Red Room, pretty famous. A housekeeper arranges fruit and flowers on a table. The bold blue arabesque pattern on the tablecloth continues beyond that table's edge and climbs up the red wall. And then we have Expressionism, and Kandinsky has always been one of my favorites. Here's Improvisation 31, images and to cultivate a more aggressive, spontaneous style. Do you see this as a sea battle? Can you see the ship? Here is another expressionist artist, Franz Marc, and they actually established, Kandinsky and Marc established Der Blaue Reiter, which means the Blue Rider. Members of the group did not subscribe to a common artistic style, rather they shared a distinctive view of art making. They believed that a strong connection existed between the visual arts and music, that color had symbolic meaning, and that the artist's true purpose was to express spiritual truths in spontaneous and innovative ways. And here is another of Marc's works. New ways of handling three-dimensional forms and the relationships of the objects. In 1909, down at the bottom, Picasso and Braque exhibited landscapes in which the scenes were reduced to the shapes of cubes. The name Cubism came to be used for the style in which subjects were rendered in a variety of simple geometric shapes. Portrait of Ambroise Voillard. Picasso studied the determined set of Voillard's mouth and jaw, his heavy eyelids, and his dark beard. Then Picasso methodically broke those features into a set of geometric facets that come together at different angles. Picasso left out details that could distract from the painting's multiple perspectives. He used neutral surrounding colors to accentuate Voillard's bald head and formidable brow. The face seems to emerge eerily as if from shards of glass. And then the other artist I mentioned was Braque, and here is Still Life, Le Jour. Major stage of Cubism called synthetic Cubism, Picasso and Braque depicted forms in a more recognizable way, although parts of their compositions are still quite abstract. Rather than paint every object as a flattened shape, they added shading to some objects to suggest form. They used brighter colors and added patterning and textures to the shapes. The textures could either be simulated by using paint and brush, or could be pieces of newspaper, advertisements, wallpaper, sand, or cloth glued directly into the composition. By combining the arts of painting and glued papers, the Cubists created the first fine art collages. Pablo Picasso once declared that painting is not made to decorate apartments. It is an instrument for offensive and defensive war against the enemy. This statement perhaps best describes Picasso's reaction to a 1937 incident during the Spanish Civil War. Living in Paris at the time, Picasso was horrified to learn that hundreds of innocent civilians had perished during a bombing raid in the North Spanish town of Guernica. And thus came this famous painting, Guernica, by Pablo Picasso. It captures the violence, horror, and suffering caused by the bombing of a town full of civilians. Yet there are no bombs or airplanes to be seen in the sky. Instead, the viewer witnesses the results of the brutal act. Guernica represents a jumbled mass of bodies, animals, and geometric shapes in a stark palette of black, white, and various shades of gray. The monumental painting measures 11 feet, 5 inches tall, and 25 feet, 5 inches long. We have a lot of things happening in our modern day world to react to and to respond to artistically. So I think it would be awesome if you wanted to try to create some layers of meaning in this project. And then we have Surrealism. Members of the Surrealist group sought to free themselves from the confines of rational thought in order to set loose the creativity within their unconscious minds. Here's that awesome painter Salvador Dali, famous for his melting clocks, creating an unsettling dreamlike scene that suggests the warping of time. And we have Joan Miró, who created his own surrealist vocabulary of abstract shapes, curving lines, and flat amoeba-like forms that inhabited his dreamlike scenes. "We must explore all the golden sparks of our souls," wrote Miró to a friend in 1923. He worked constantly to convey his sense of wonder in his paintings. New art inspired by old masters. So as you can see, the lute player of Miró's is actually mimicking this 1661 painting. Can you see the similarities? Pretty awesome. You could do that. Not all modern paintings are abstract. We have in early America a movement that kind of rejects all of that abstract expressionist and is painting with more realism. And this might be called American scene painting, where you're just painting scenes of basic American life. And this is Hopper's Nighthawks. He used the architecture of the diner and the surrounding buildings to anchor the asymmetric composition while light and color create the mood. The geometric shapes and the horizontal, vertical, and diagonal lines all work together to create an organized and balanced whole. The strong angles and deep shadows also add to the drama. And of course, you've seen the famous painting American Gothic painters. I realized that all the really good ideas I'd ever had came to me while I was milking a cow. So I went back to Iowa. When he returned, he developed a vision for his work, which he called regionalism. A subgroup under American scene painting, regionalists believe artists should produce clearly understandable paintings as unequivocal rejection of the abstract, expressive styles that Wood had seen in Europe. Rejecting urbanization and industrialization, Wood and his fellow regionalists depicted rural or country Midwestern values and a Puritan work ethic in an honest, uncomplicated fashion. And this is not the farmer's wife. I believe it's his daughter. And the Gothic part of it comes from the Gothic window here. That's the Gothic influence there. Thus the name American Gothic. American Gothic caused quite a stir when it was unveiled during a 1930 show at the Art Institute of Chicago. Some people believed that Wood did a magnificent job of capturing America's strength and spirit. Others perceived it as a satirical, disparaging illustration of Midwestern life. How do you interpret the painting? What do you think Wood wanted to express? Maybe you can incorporate some of that type of mystique in your painting. And then we have abstract expressionism, famous artist Jackson Pollock. You've seen the paintings. It just looks like someone stood there and threw paint at the canvas. His canvases are huge. And Pollock has a keen ability to fuse the impulsive with the planned. He says, I can control the flow of paint. There is no accident. Autumn Rhythm exhibits the delicate balance between spontaneous gestures and the calculated application of paint. Autumn Rhythm is a purely non-representational work of art. Pollock did not create shapes that are abstracted from reality, nor does the painting represent anything from the real world. However, the image does employ effectively the elements of art and the principles of design. Which elements and principles do you think Pollock used most successfully? William de Kooning's series of 6 women paintings from the 1950s that solidified his position of prominence within the abstract expressionist movement. For example, in Woman 1, de Kooning depicted a seated female, legs crossed and arms resting in her lap. Slashes of black paint defined her wild eyes, tooth-bearing grin, and exaggerated breasts. She's a garish figure whose oversized proportions are defined by brash colors and frenzied marks. The painting caused an uproar when it was exhibited at the Sidney Janis Gallery in New York in 1953. Some critics believed that de Kooning had intentionally brutalized the female form and accused him of being anti-woman, a claim that he vehemently denied. Others felt that he abandoned the fundamental ideals of abstraction. What is your response to de Kooning's painting? By the mid-1960s, it seemed that there were no boundaries left for modernist painters and sculptors to cross. All the rules and conventions of traditional art had already been rejected, ignored, or broken. Modernism was fast becoming old news. But art, like nature, abhors a vacuum. Some new style had to step in to replace modernism, and it came to be called, logically, if not imaginatively, postmodernism, because it encompasses a broad range of styles and includes references to art of the past. Postmodernism is difficult to define as a movement. The range of formats is broad, too, from easel painting to temporary installation pieces in public spaces. Postmodern artists often drew from mass culture for their inspiration. They sometimes incorporated images of popular contemporary icons in their work, making it easily accessible and recognizable to everyone who experienced it. Here's an example. We have Robert Rauschenberg's estate here, and there are some popular pop icons that everyone can identify with here, some representational pieces like the Statue of Liberty, and we've got some street signs here and a stop sign upside down. Rauschenberg returned to New York in 1953 and began to experiment with cast-off materials that he found on the street, things people had cast off or thrown away. He dubbed his new works combines because they blended painting, drawing, photography, and various found objects, including a stuffed goat, a stuffed eagle, a quilt, clocks, and a pillow. So here's our mixed media. Yes, getting into mixed media. This is what you guys are going to be doing now for the next couple of weeks. Keep your eyes out for things that you see on the streets, somebody threw away that you could put into your mixed media artwork. So that's just an overview of Unit 5, Modernism, and let's go ahead and look at the Project 3 folder. Essentially, these are the video directions. You're just going to do 2 projects for this. It's going to be a modernist painting, okay, and we showed you tons of different inspirations that you can choose from, or you can create your own, and mixed media artwork. So this is getting into that modern collage where you're using cast-off objects and just make it really interesting. Show us a little bit of 3-dimension in there. You can also do things with mixed media artwork, like I've seen students use the rest of their clay to create like a skull and then have like branches coming out of it for horns and things like that. So use your imagination. You don't have to go flat. You can go 3-dimensional with this. All right, and then there's this awesome pacing guide below. You have 10 days to get this done. So you've got 5 days to work, and these are school days, to work on your modernist painting, and then you've got 5 days to work on your mixed media. So this doesn't start officially until after we finish the Unit 5 test, which won't be until next Wednesday, or wherever you're at, Wednesday the 28th. And Project 3 starts officially on Thursday, that's March 1st. And so here are your first 5 days for your modernist painting. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, I think it's okay. We'll just go ahead and keep it due on Tuesday the 13th because there's a couple of weekends in there. That should be plenty of time for you guys to get it done. And then I believe we'll have our last class together on March 14th. And at that point, you should be all done. You'll notice that there's nothing on the plan after that. Woohoo! And the block ends on the 22nd. So that'll get you finished nice and early so that you'll have your finals week and your other classes and get to focus on that. Of course, you can get Project 3 done as soon as you want and just kind of be done, if you know what I mean. All right, good luck, everybody.